Welcome to the Trail and Ultra Running Training Podcast. My name is Will Frantz, and I'm here to help you improve your training so you can have more fun out on the trails.
Today I want to talk about consistency, but before we really get deep into that, let's talk about something really, brief, quick tip, whatever you want to call these. You don't need the fanciest gear on the planet in order to be able to run well. I think I was having this conversation with people today where it's like running often when we start feels like a very cheap sport. And then we get into it and we realize it's very much not, because shoes and hydration packs and powders and gels and all these things, they do add up fairly quickly. And you just don't need to buy the top of the line things in order to do really well, especially if you're just getting started out. I would invest in a good pair of shoes. I would invest in a decent hydration pack that doesn't chafe you. And what I mean by both of those things doesn't mean it's like the newest top of the line thing. Literally might just mean that it fits you well and your feet feel good in the shoes. There's a hydration pack. Can never pronounce the name, but it's like Iong or something. And if you aren't sure if something's going to fit you or if that you even want to use a hydration pack, this one's great. It's like $30 and it's a great way to start testing this stuff. And instead of buying the fanciest powders on the internet, put a bunch of sugar into water in a bottle and then add some lemon juice and salt to it. And you have made super sweet Gatorade that will serve you really well out there on the trails. It doesn't need to be the fanciest thing or the newest thing, or whatever we hear about on a podcast that has some sort of link to it that whoever is currently using. It can just be something that fits you and serves you well, and you don't have to sell your left arm in order to do this sport. It is definitely a little pricey sometimes, and we can save money in certain spots. So, that out of the way, let's talk about some ideas on consistency. We often hear things like you have to be consistent, be consistent in your training. If you want to do well, be consistent. And I think that is a tough thing to determine what it even means. I sent out an email on this morning. I wanted to dive a little deeper into this idea because I've kind of been thinking about it on and off all day. And how consistent do you have to be to hit goals like an ultra? I don't know, 85%. And that's definitely what I said in the email this morning. But full disclosure, the real answer is it depends on how well you want to do in your race. And if you don't really care at all, then you can be 0% consistent. And if you want to win and it's a really competitive field, then it might be 99%, right? There is a gradient here depending on your goals and desires. Now, for most people, trying to do hard things a little outside their comfort zone, probably about 85%. So let's use some simple math here. Let's call it 4 weeks in a month because that makes it much easier than 31 days. And if you're training 5 times a week, then that is 20 training sessions per month. That means you might miss 3 if you want to be really on track for your goal. Now, there are definitely a list of caveats here. Let's talk about a couple of them. 1, you might be following a plan that's a really bad fit for you in the first place. If you get a couple weeks into a plan and you just feel like absolute trampled garbage all the time, then it would be silly to try to be continue to be consistent with that plan because it's making you feel bad. We should be consistent with the things that help you, not with the things that hurt you. For example, I'm pretty sure that I could be consistent with drinking a couple whiskeys every night because I've done it. It is not helpful to my goals at the moment of progressing as an athlete and sleeping well and all of these things, but I could definitely be consistent doing that. It's why I don't drink much anymore, because it makes me feel bad. We're looking for helpful consistency, not harmful. So if you've started following a plan and you realize for whatever reason it doesn't fit your schedule, the volume is too high, it just isn't a good fit for your needs and your training style, then we shouldn't try to be consistent with this plan just because you started it. Like, I know a lot of people on the internet who start something like 75 hard and they try to be consistent with it. And all it does is like wear them down and kind of break them and turn them away from fitness. We do not need to be super diligent about plans that are not helping us. We should be consistent with stuff that actually helps us hit our goals and makes us feel good, or at least mostly good in the process. Another caveat, if you are coming off of an injury or like are currently injured, then this may look a lot different. Like, I train a good amount of injured people, partially because I've kind of made that my shtick on the internet. And I shine, especially in the strength realm, of like helping people who aren't really injured enough for PT or just finished their PT, but aren't exactly like fully healthy either. And I train a lot of these people at the club. I'm often the person that someone sends me after they just get off PT. And I've personally spent a lot of my life in that space. And my dad was a physical therapist, so I'm very used to that realm. Now, if we're looking to work with an injured person, or if you are currently an injured person or recently were, then you might adjust a plan daily. Like, I try to write a plan about 2 weeks out. I tend to do most of my run programming on Friday or Saturday. And then if you're hurt, we might scrap that a day into those 2 weeks. Like, I've absolutely planned stuff for someone by the day, depending on how they're doing and how they're recovering. And we can like find that stepwise fashion as needed. It is one of the reasons that all of my athletes can text me on a daily basis if needed and make adjustments as many times as possible, because it has to fit where you are. Now, if we go back to this 85% idea, there are a lot of ways to hit 85%. Yes, that is 3 days out of a like 20-day training cycle, but it could also just be a little bit off the end of like every run in your training cycle. If you program something like 45 minutes of an easy run with like 5 strides at the end of it, and you only do 2, what do we call that? I don't know. I don't think there's a very good way to jam everything into a percentile. This is one of the ways that we often end up with problems on things like trying to quantify all of this stuff. Like, for me, if I saw one of my athletes run for 45 minutes and then do 2 or 3 strides, I'd probably check that box as absolutely okay, because the intent of the exercise was run for a while at a decent while at an easy pace, and then toss in a little bit of speed at the end. But if we're following a like pre-written plan on the internet, it wasn't perfect. So what do we call that? I don't have a good answer for you here, but probably not perfect. Maybe you knock 1% off of that day, so you were 99% consistent that day. This is kind of why 85% is a decent rule, but we should flow with the like vibe of it. Because if we're going to follow something like a pre-written plan or make a lot of these generalized statements, we lose the fact that you, me, everyone doing this training is an individual, and pre-written plans are not individualized. I just put one out for 50K. If you haven't had it, comment, I'll drop it, whatever. And I'm pretty happy with it. And I gave a few different ways to personalize workouts, but it's not perfect. And I doubt it's perfect for you. And I honestly doubt that anyone will ever follow it perfectly for the rest of time. And that's okay. It doesn't mean you're not going to run a good race. It means that you're trying to use a generalized resource for something that's like best done through individualized training or personalization or whatever. And that's why it took so long to release one, because it certainly wasn't the running calendar on there. It was all the like preamble and how to adjust this and how to make this fit your needs. And the like excessive amount of writing in that document was most of the work, because no plan is going to be perfect for you when you pull it off the internet. An AI chatbot can write an acceptable running calendar now. And yet I'm not all that worried for now about an AI chatbot taking my job, because that's not what I actually really do. A running calendar is part of the plan. might be the plan, but it's not the important part of your training. The important part of your training is making the plan fit you and like work for your schedule and do the things that you need it to do. If we're looking at something like consistency, we shouldn't obsess over whatever the hell 85% means. Don't look at your calendar and like all of your checks or X'd boxes and like take a few minutes to see what you're actually doing and like what you're not doing. Like, are you missing your speed work every week? Are you cutting your speed work short every week? If so, why? Like, that would be a really good question to ask. Do you hate it? And if so, great. That's a great answer. That is a great thing to figure out, that you hate speed work and that's why you're actually avoiding it every week. We should then decide whether you don't care about getting faster, because if you don't need to do a ton of it. And if you do care about getting faster, you should figure out a way to make it happen anyway. And we can also look at strength work. Are you missing that every week? Are you having to cut it short every week? Why? Same response from the speed work kind of thing. Like, I notice that very few ultra runners miss their 60-minute runs, but they'll often miss their 30-minute strength sessions. And it's not a time thing. It's usually a lack of prioritization because, yes, you're a runner, you should run, most of your training should be running, but we would do better to like take 20 minutes off of a run here and there and do some deadlifts. It'll make you stronger, it'll make you more durable, etc. But it is very rarely the case that I see that happen. I also talk to a lot of people who say they run like 30 miles per week, but it's often like 30 miles every other week with a 10 to 15 mile week thrown in between. I would not call that consistent, for the record, but it technically is, because it is a consistent 30-10 back and forth. Tom Bench, guilty. Yeah, I'm guilty of a bunch of stuff too, man. We're going to get to that later. I'm going to call myself out. Don't even worry about it. But I also run into people who say they've run like 30 miles per week the past 2 weeks, but they were running 10 miles or less for like months prior to that. And yeah, that is, you are currently running 30 miles per week, but we scaled really quickly, and you don't actually know if your body is really capable of fully taking that volume. Same with like the 30-15-30 thing. It's not the same as 30 miles per week. It's not even the same as 22. It is just different. It's a like 45-mile, 2-week cycle. And it's not that there aren't good reasons for any of these things. Like some jobs require that you work 7 days on and be like on call all the time and then take 7 days off. If I were training someone who had that schedule, I wouldn't even consider a 7-day training cycle. I would do a 14-day training cycle and figure out what works, where we would cycle back and forth, something like that. All of these things are fine if they work for you, as long as you're okay with the consequences of them. With speed work, it's very likely you're not going to get a lot faster, and you're not going to get the benefits to your running form that speed work provides. When it comes to strength, you're not going to be as powerful, and you may have like a higher injury risk, and you will probably struggle with like putting a bag in an overhead compartment later in life. When it comes to cycling volume back and forth, you just won't quite know how your body does under a high amount of consistent load, i.e. running 100 to 200 miles. But if it fits for you and it's working, that's great. We don't need to like ram ourselves into one definition of consistency, but all of these trade-offs have consequences, and that's what we have to understand. And this is just talking about a running calendar. Like, there are little doses of consistency every day that you can do to improve your situation. I'm pretty open about my foibles. Like, I don't sleep as much as I should, not even close. And this leads to exhaustion and a higher injury risk. I don't eat as much throughout the day as I should, leading to a lower ability to train hard a lot of the time. And again, a higher injury risk. And I'm better than I used to be on both fronts, but it is a pretty consistent battle. I just forget to eat. I forgot to eat today until 2 p.m. And I don't have a normal hunger response due to years of dieting and bad self-care. And it's not good. It's a thing I deal with. It's not ideal for an athlete. And when I am in a heavy training cycle, like I do a lot of meal prep to make sure I don't do that. But this is one of the reasons why I was injured so much in my 20s. And in general, like, it's just, we got to work with what we have, and you have so many ways to be consistent and make progress that aren't even on the training calendar. So when we talk about something like 85% pulling numbers out of your training and like checks and X's on a calendar, this doesn't even cover the other things you could be doing, right? Like, you don't need to seek perfection, and that is the whole point here. It's not like you need to do a ton of work. You do. I think most people realize that you need to do a ton of work to do well in an ultra. And if you don't, here is your wake-up call. You need to do a ton of work to do well in an ultra, but you certainly don't need to be perfect. Like, perfect is not a realistic goal. And someone who's called myself a perfectionist in the past, I had to come well with terms that, like, perfectionism is usually code for a couple things, and it's just a way for your brain to talk you out of starting or to talk you into quitting once you've slipped up, because it won't be perfect. And we all know that. So if we're just trying to chase perfection, it is a great way to just talk yourself out of trying. Now, professional athletes require something really close to perfection. People like Usain Bolt and Sha'Carri Richardson spend years trying to drop 1/100th of a second off a 100-meter time. But most of us are not professional athletes. I would doubt anybody listening to this is a professional athlete, and we don't need that level of perfect. Like, for my day-to-day, I'd call it like 40%, if I'm going to be super honest. I was supposed to do deadlifts. I did not. I was supposed to do 30 minutes on the stair stepper. I got 20. I forgot to eat breakfast, and I almost forgot to eat lunch. And why did all of this happen? Because I didn't get my stuff together in the morning, so that was the breakfast thing. Some stuff came up at work, so I had to deal with that instead of lift. Technical issues. Some more stuff came up at work, so I had to trim my training session a little bit on the stair stepper. And then it wasn't a complete loss, right? Like, I made a protein shake, I drank a bunch of water, and I did mobility work while training people, because like getting deep into a squat and moving my hips around is great for mobility. It also helps me see how people's feet move when they squat. Right now, I am standing here with like aggressive toe spreaders, because as I've said, I've been struggling with something that seems to be Morton's neuroma. And if you put these things in between your toes, spreads your metatarsals out, and you do a lot better. And I'm also drinking a bunch of water. Not a complete loss of the day, like a half check, 40%. I'm going to try again tomorrow, and it will be better. This is just life right now, and it's life for a lot of people all the time. Now, if this was how things went every week, where I was like constantly missing my training sessions, I would have to have some conversations, right? And I have these conversations with other people wherein it's just a wake-up call and figure out what we're actually looking to do, how well we want to do, and whether we're on track. This is one of the primary reasons I personally haven't signed up for any races at the moment, because my life is a mess. And it's a mess that I enjoy because I love my job and I love my dog, but they both make it very difficult for me to guarantee training on a weekly basis. But I'm doing work. I'm doing a little more every week. And sometimes that's just what life looks like. If I were looking down the barrel of a race in the next few months, I would either have to step up my training, or I would have to expect to get injured, or I'd have to drop out. But it's not what we're doing right now. We're just trying to get a little better every day. I'm a little better than I was last week, and I'm a lot better than I was last month. Progress, right? You don't need to be perfect. Just go try hard things. Do a little bit every day and pursue your goal. And then next week, do a little more most days. If you feel like shit, take a day off. If you feel like shit all the time, then find a new plan that actually fits you and helps you do well. And if you aren't making the progress you want, then figure out what you need to do a little more of to get there, or try to recover a little better. A lot of the time it's not more work, it's that you sleep 4 hours a night, right? Or change your goal. You don't need to run 100 miles this year. You don't need to run it next year. You don't need to run it ever. But if you want to, just think about taking a little more time, because it is shocking what like an extra 12 months can do when we add that to a training cycle and don't put this random like self-imposed goal on ourselves. Like, you don't need to run 100 miles within a year. Give it 5. I don't know, 4. You can probably do it in 2 if you're really consistent, but it doesn't need to be in the span of 12 months. And if your life is really busy, it probably shouldn't be, because you're going to give up some other stuff that you truly care about, like being there for your kids, being there for a puppy, whatever it is in your life that's big. Like, do work, do hard work, make most of it stuff you really enjoy. And because there's so many things to do as a human. And then some of it should be stuff you don't really enjoy, but don't completely hate. For me, 3-minute repeats on a treadmill. Don't completely hate it, certainly don't enjoy it. And then do what you need to do to recover in between the work so that you actually get the benefits from it. It doesn't need to be perfect. If you have a big goal and you care about the outcome, then we need to be like 85% consistent, whatever that means. If anything has been shown over the past like 20 minutes, it means I don't know what that means. But aim for something in the ballpark of hitting far more of your workouts than you miss and doing a lot more of your recovery stuff than you don't. And then take a breath, because you got this. And if you want my help, please reach out. That's what I'm here for. I like helping people do hard things outside. And I think if more people did more hard things outside, the world would be a little better. So it's got a little more philosophical than I intended it to, but I hope it was helpful. I'm going to head out. Hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll be back with another one of these soon.
Thank you for listening to the Trail and Ultra Running Training Podcast. Honestly, I'm still surprised and honored that anybody wants to hear what I have to say, so thank you. To be clear, not a doctor, nor a registered dietitian, or any other kind of medical professional. I'm a personal trainer, a nutrition coach, and a running coach, and I have a passion for training trail runners. You should always speak with a qualified medical professional before making any changes to your training or nutrition program. If you enjoyed the podcast or found it helpful, please take a second to leave a rating or review. I'd really appreciate it. Or you could just share it with someone for whom you think it might be helpful. I make these kinds of things in order to provide more quality, free resources to people, so the more people who hear it, the better. If you want more of this information, please head to the Trail and Ultra Running Training group on Facebook, where we discuss all aspects of training so you can have more fun doing the sport that you love. Thank you again for listening.